Dinosaurs were huge. But why? Take a look at this dino-sized pile of dino poo. It was left behind by one of the largest land animals to ever live, the aptly named Argentinosaurus. Weighing in at about 100 tons, it reached lengths of over 30 meters. But how did such a critter get so big? Hi, I'm here to answer all your burning science questions. And this channel is dedicated to answering all of your burning science questions. So send us yours right now, and we'll do our best to answer it. Okay, back to the matter at hand. To understand what forces could have driven an animal to grow so large, let's take a closer look at our favorite supersized dino, the Argentinosaurus. This plant-eating dinosaur lived in South America during the late Cretaceous period, which lasted from about 100 to 66 million years ago. At the time, the continent had rifted apart into its current form. As a result, the eastern side of the continent, where Argentina is located, had a mild climate with lots of rainfall. This was great for growing plants, which could be the foundation of a food chain supporting enormous animals. But just because there was plenty of food around doesn't mean that all dinos took on gargantuan proportions. After all, other herbivores from the same region like Myasura didn't get nearly as big. That suggests that getting supersized wasn't just about food availability. But before we get to what else might have been at play, we need to talk about how scientists even know how big dinosaurs got. It's not like they unearthed a fossil of an Argentinosaurus that was fully grown. So how do we know how big they got? Well, one way is to look at the growth rings in dinosaur bones. Kind of like tree rings. Scientists can count the rings to determine how old a particular individual was when they died. They can also compare the size of a fossil with the age of the fossil to work out how fast it grew. Using this method, paleontologists have estimated that the Argentinosaurus grew to its full size sometime between 28 and 39 years of age, which makes it a late bloomer compared to most mammals. Most mammals reach sexual maturity in their late teens or early 20s, but sauropods, the group that includes the Argentinosaurus, often didn't reach maturity until their mid-20s, and they continued growing after that for more than a decade. Now, scientists don't exactly know why dinosaurs grew up so slowly and reached such late maturity, but it probably had something to do with their size. Larger animals require more time to develop because larger animals have more cells, and those cells have to divide more times than smaller animals to build out all that extra tissue. But once they hit adulthood, they kept on growing. The growth ring data suggests that adult Argentinosaurus kept growing throughout their lives, though others may have stopped growing at some point, but still retained the ability to keep growing if conditions were favorable. And fossils tell us something else about the life history of this giant dino. They show that it lived in a herd. Scientists know this because they found a fossil of a juvenile individual near adult-sized individuals. It's unlikely that an adult would have been so close to young ones if it were a solitary creature. So it seems like Argentinosaurus were social animals who spent their whole lives together. And while this behavior doesn't directly relate to their gigantic size, it does hint at another factor that may have played a role. See, animals don't evolve in a vacuum. Natural selection favors traits that help an animal survive and reproduce in its environment, but also in relation to its interactions with other members of its own species and other species. The development of herds, for example, might have been a response to threats posed by other animals. And we know that because the rocks where the Argentinosaurus was found also contain fossils of Gigantism, a massive carnivore that's thought to have preyed on the sauropods. Interestingly enough, the Gigantism was only about 13 meters long and weighed about 400 kilograms, making it large, but not gargantuan. And yet, it was the largest meat-eater in its environment. In other words, the race to gigantism may have been driven in part by the pressure of keeping up with supersized predators. When you think about it, it makes sense. If you're a plant and you produce nutritious leaves that some other animals are really keen on eating, natural selection will favor any genetic variants that make you grow leaves that are harder to access. Maybe those leaves grow higher up on the plant or are tougher or produce toxins. Similarly, if you're an animal and your food source grows more protective, You'll favor genes that help you grow larger and stronger to keep up. Over millions of years, this back and forth can drive both species to become larger. Scientists aren't sure if this is what happened with the Argentinosaurus and the Gigantosaurus, but it has been observed in other animals. For instance, the marine iguana, a type of lizard found in the Galapagos Islands, has evolved to eat the tough, spiky seaweed that grows along rocky shores, and the sea lion has evolved to become large enough to dive deep and hunt for fish that live far below the surface. These examples show that competition for resources can drive animals to become larger, which may have been the case for dinosaurs. It's likely that a number of factors drove the evolution of gigantism in dinosaurs, including food availability, maturity, age, predation, and interspecies competition. But there's one more thing that might have pushed them toward becoming gigantic: oxygen. Like pretty much every land animal alive today, dinosaurs breathed air, and air contains oxygen, which animals need for cellular respiration. The process of converting stored energy into usable energy, oxygen is taken up by the lungs and then diffuses into cells where it's used in mitochondria. In short, oxygen is vital for life, but too much of it can be dangerous too. Too much oxygen can cause oxidative stress, which can damage DNA and other cellular components and lead to cell death. Because dinosaurs were so large, their cells would have required more oxygen to function. If the air contained less oxygen, their cells might not have gotten enough, which could have been bad news for them. Conversely, if the air contained too much oxygen, it could have caused oxidative stress and damaged their cells. So it seems that the evolution of gigantism might have been tied to the oxygen level in the atmosphere. In the early days of life on Earth, the atmosphere contained very little free oxygen. Today, it's about 21% oxygen, but back then, it was only about 15%. However, during the Jurassic period, when many of the largest dinosaurs roamed the Earth, the amount of oxygen was about 31%. Today, the amount of free oxygen in the atmosphere is declining due to human activity. So it's possible that in the future, we won't see as many jumbo-sized animals because there won't be as much oxygen to support them. Scientists have studied ancient rocks and soils to reconstruct past oxygen levels. And by studying the chemistry of preserved tissues, they can figure out the oxygen levels that dinosaurs were exposed to. These studies suggest that the increase in atmospheric oxygen that occurred in the late Triassic and early Jurassic periods allowed dinosaurs to grow larger. However, oxygen levels aren't the whole story. During the Cretaceous period, oxygen levels decreased again to about 25%, but dinosaurs continued to grow large in South America. So while oxygen levels might have influenced dinosaur size, there must have been other factors at play, such as temperature. As we discussed earlier, the eastern part of Gondwana, land where the Argentinosaurus lived, was quite warm and wet. Larger animals tend to have lower surface area to volume ratios than smaller animals. That means that for an animal that's really tall and thin, the majority of their volume is tucked inside a relatively small area, reducing the surface area. Smaller animals have a larger surface area relative to their volume, which means they lose heat faster. So it appears that the warm climate and lower surface area to volume ratio would have helped dinosaurs maintain a stable body temperature, which may have made it easier for them to grow large. We've talked about a lot of factors that might have contributed to the rise of gigantic dinosaurs, but we haven't talked about one major event that affected their reign: the asteroid impact that marked the end of the Cretaceous period. About 66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly 6 miles wide slammed into Earth, leading to the extinction of the dinosaurs and about 75% of all species. While scientists once thought that the impact wiped out 80 to 90% of all species instantly, new research suggests that the real die-off happened after the impact. And one reason for this is that the impact didn't happen where scientists expected it to. Scientists initially estimated that the impact happened in shallow water based on the location of the impact crater, the Chicxulub crater, off the coast of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. But geological evidence suggests that it actually hit land. This is good news for the dinosaurs because the impact would have had a smaller immediate effect on the biosphere. The bad news is that it triggered massive climate changes that made the planet a less hospitable place for dinosaurs and other critters. So while we may never know for sure why dinosaurs got so big, we can continue to unearth clues that paint a picture of what life was like when they roamed the earth. And we can use that knowledge to better understand what's happening in the world today. Thanks for watching this episode of SCI Show. And thanks especially to our supporters who help us make these videos. We couldn't keep making these videos without your support.